Hello everyone, my name is Christian. Welcome to my hobby blog. Today is October 22nd, so it's day 22 of Spooktober, so that's exciting. Today I watched the first feature film by David Cronenberg, one of my favorite directors of all time, Shivers, Shiver Me Timbers, as I used to call it. It's a Vestron release, really well done, multiple commentary tracks, mini interviews with the stars and special effects people, all of that. It was originally called Orgy of the Blood Parasites because David Cronenberg, in an interview on this disc, talked about how he really wanted to go deep into the exploitation part of the movie because it is all about blood, not blood sucking, but like it's just parasites that take over human bodies and they become sex maniacs. And I think the best way to describe this movie is what David Cronenberg heard. He was talking about this on the commentary track, where he heard a reporter say that this movie is basically Night of the Living Dead, but with libido. Meaning that if you just put in a lot of sex into Night of the Living Dead and like horniness, then this is what this movie is. This is how you make Shivers, is you put in horniness into Night of the Living Dead. And it is absolutely amazing. I watched it with a commentary track because I've seen it so many times at this point that I was very curious about behind the scenes. And it's funny because one of the main actresses in this movie is Lynn Lowry, who is someone that she just has that face. That face that when you see her, you know her, and you don't know from where you know her. So I looked her up, figure out who the fuck this person is. And she is in two movies that I know very well. Well, one of them I haven't seen yet, but it's on Vinegar Syndrome. It's called Sugar Cookies. That's the Lloyd Kaufman produced, produced, I believe, movie. And the other is The Crazies. She's the weird girl who is getting hit on by her dad or something throughout the movie. It's the George Romero film, not the remake. That one sucks. But this movie is just so amazing when you watch the interview with the special effects guy, because there's just enough special effects to where it's creepy throughout. But the special effects guy had the chance to do Easy Rider and Night of the Living Dead, which is another connection. And he ended up turning it down because he didn't think they were like worthy. And he was just like, God, that was the biggest mistake of my life. And so when this came along just a few years later in 1975, he was like, I'm taking this. Like, I don't care. And it was especially when he found out that Barbara Steele was in this movie that he was like, I want to be in this movie. I must do her makeup or something. And if you don't remember her, I talked about her a week ago, roughly, talking about the movie Black Sunday. She was the lead in that, and she was just amazing in that. And so a couple years later, she did this little movie. So David Cronenberg discussed in the commentary track about how when they casted her for the role, that really just cemented credibility to the production, because it was originally called Orgy of the Blood Parasites, and then it got changed to I should have wrote this down, but I guess I didn't write it down, but it was called like Massacre of the Parasites or something after that. And they were like, no, that's still too schlocky. So the studio was like, you're calling it Shivers. And David Cronenberg talked about how he didn't have a better name than Shivers. And for the most part, it's a good title. It doesn't give away the fact that these nasty little creatures here inhabit people's bodies and make them, I guess, shiver from all the sexual activity that they do. But to continue on the special effects aspect, The thing that really wowed me is that intro sequence when we see a really creepy doctor like wrestling with a pretty young woman, and he's like cutting her up and gagging her and just all this stuff, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? I remember watching this actually with my dad like a year ago, and he was like, I don't like this at all, I hate this, what are you making me watch, and this, that, and I was like, just wait. It's like, this movie has blood sucking or human possessing maggots that make you have sex. Like, it's fun, I swear. And listening to the commentary track about that scene, about how they had to film it, and they didn't show any of the special effects. They had maybe blood that the guy was like off screen, like cutting her stomach open, but you could just see like the crest of her stomach. You couldn't see the other side of it, and that's where he was cutting. So like after he cut it, he basically just took blood and just smeared it across her belly to open up the wound by spreading her wound. And I don't remember it being like that. I remember it being very grotesque and disgusting, uncomfortable. And watching it with the commentary track, I was like, they didn't show anything. It reminded me of Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you really don't see any violence. It's all in your mind. And that's what makes this movie so great, in my opinion, and why it's one of my favorites. But the next thing that I want to talk about is the commentary track itself, because I really enjoyed it. And they talked about how it was just 2 weeks of shooting, like 14 days. And they talked about, the special effects guy and David Cronenberg talked about how a lot of the effects were one take. They had one shot, they filmed it, they kept going. It didn't matter if it worked or not. There were many points throughout the movie where you can see just a tiny bit of a string here, or, you know, the coat hanger that they were puppeteering the maggots with. And one thing that's funny is that David Cronenberg talked about how he wanted, like, the creatures to be a lot more explicitly penis shaped. Like, that was really bizarre, and he said he didn't want to push it too far, like calling it orgy of the sex maggots or whatever it's called, orgy of the blood parasites. He said like that was him like pushing it, but he said having the penis shaped maggots was like, he just knew that wasn't gonna work, so he settled with shit looking ones. They look like shit, literally. It doesn't look like shit in terms of quality, it looks like fecal matter. And so he decided to go that way, and it worked out well. They're pretty convincing. The acting in this movie, everyone fully believes in the concept. No one's there for a paycheck. Everyone was there actually acting out, you know, their hearts out. So, one thing that was interesting, which I did not know, I assumed that they filmed on set, but apparently they just went to an apartment in Ontario or Toronto and just asked an apartment owner, I guess, to be like, hey, can we film like in your apartment or in your like apartment complex, and we'll find volunteers for people who want us to film in their homes. And so there are many scenes in this movie where we have hilarious painting and set design, but it's not even a set design, that's just the houses or their apartments. And he talked about how like he told everyone, or at least warned them, not to like have too many objects in the rooms, because he was going to not destroy it, but there was going to be a lot of blood, a lot of tussling, wrestling, people knocking each other over, and this and the other. And everyone was fine with that. So they made the movie in 2 weeks in a real apartment complex. with very limited budget. David Cronenberg didn't even know how to make a movie at this point, and if you've seen his early stuff, like Stereo or Crimes of the Future, which is, I just got The Brood on Criterion, and it comes with that, and so I plan on watching that soon. But Stereo was just so, I don't want to say bad, but it's so unrealized. And what makes that short film interesting to watch, at least for me, what was interesting was that it had a lot of the kernels of ideas that he had when he was making Scanners. When you saw him making Scanners, he brought all the concepts from Stereo and just went nuts. And so that's the only reason to watch Stereo, in my opinion. There's really not any other way or justification I can have to watch it. It's just interesting to watch in the frame of his career. So let's see what else I have for my notes. One thing that was curious, and that I'm gonna have to rewatch all his movies now, is that he says he purposely makes all his movies comedies because he says movies without humor are not movies, or that they're out of touch with reality. And that was very interesting because there are little moments that are just so ridiculous and hilarious that you laugh, but I've never viewed his movies as comedies at all. And so I'm very curious about that. But I have 2 more points left. So the second to last one is that there's a sequence towards the end that is eerily similar to the chestburster scene in Alien by Dan O'Bannon and Ridley Scott and all them. But there's a scene where a guy is being checked on by a doctor, and he pulls away the bed sheet, and he sees the alien like on his chest, and so he looks at it and he's like, oh no, like it's already post like ripping out of the chest, and then the alien jumps at his face and then goes into his body and then inhabits him. And David Cronenberg talked about in the commentary track and in an interview on this disc that he went to a German screening of this movie in Hot, where someone stood up and started yelling, talking about, oh, you stole this sequence from Alien, like, you're a plagiarist, and like all this stuff. And David Cronenberg was like, no, this movie was made 2 years before Alien. He was like, oh, this guy who accused him of this, he was like, oh, well, I guess we now know who the real thief is, and basically called Ridley Scott a plagiarist. Because Dan O'Bannon is pretty open with how much he really appreciates David Cronenberg, but Ridley Scott just does not at all admit, I guess, to the fact that they kind of stole it. David Cronenberg just did not care, really. He thought it was an honor. So that was fun. I had no idea, never even thought about Alien while watching this movie. But hey, now I am. And the last point that I had is that the title of the apartment is the Starliner, which I've always been like, that's a weird apartment name. That sounds like a apartment name that like is trying to appeal to like a younger like residents, that want to live in this place. Ooh, the Starliner, you know, this and the other. Well, the explanation behind that Cronenberg gave was that he wanted to give the name of the apartment like a spaceship type of name. And so, and the reason why he did that is because each apartment, as he viewed it, is a vessel or pod within the spaceship itself. And so every time that we have a scene of the maggots or parasites that enter the body of somebody, it's always disconnected from everybody else. It's just them. And then slowly but surely the spaceship is won over by, these parasites. And there was one specific moment that Cronenberg pointed out that he calls his Night of the Living Dead moment, where a little girl and her mom are in the elevator and they get attacked by one of the sex parasites. And the elevator door opens in a later scene, and you see her holding like her mom's arm and like chewing it. And he was like, yeah, I didn't even think about Night of the Living Dead when I made that scene, but yeah, I guess it subconsciously came into the movie. That was just an idea I thought was creepy, and I put it in. And it's all these little things I really liked. You can tell Cronenberg really loved making this movie and making it just as good as he could. But he had a lot of funding issues, time issues. He had 2 weeks. Like I could not imagine shooting a movie this epic for 2 weeks. They had a large apartment building, and there was just so many logistical things. And this is something David Cronenberg pointed out in the commentary track, is that the what's it called, the linear, the consistency between scenes is very off. I can't think of the word right now. Usually I know it, but he said there were many times where they couldn't keep like haircuts straight from scene to scene. And the first scene with Lynn Lowry that they filmed was like the final scene with her, when she's having a big battle with someone and it's covered in blood, and her hairstyle is totally different from the rest of the movie for like 5 minutes. And so he talked about, he was like, gosh, we should have hired someone to keep track of linear story. God, what's the word? I can't think of it. I'm sorry. But this is all these different issues that came together, and it still turns out to be a really good movie. I highly recommend this. This is not the first Cronenberg movie you should watch, in my opinion. It is very weird, very different. So, yeah. I didn't realize this would go so long, but I really like this movie. This is a movie worthy of study, in my opinion. And I highly recommend everyone to go check out this specific release and watch the commentary track, and to watch the interview with Lynn Lowry and with the special effects guy, all that. So, thank you all for watching.